Most stay-at-home mums think they don't have enough time to build a business, and on paper, maybe you don't. If you're imagining 6-hour workdays, total silence, and uninterrupted focus, and children who just quietly entertain themselves for 3 hours straight, well, that's never happened in my house. But what if the goal isn't more time? What if it's building something that actually fits inside the time that you already have? Because 1 or 2 focused hours can be far more powerful than we give them credit for. Here's what I see happen a lot. A mum decides that she would love to earn from home. Maybe she genuinely needs the income. Maybe she wants something that feels like hers, or maybe she just has that quiet nudge that, she's capable of building something meaningful. And then she starts looking at what building a business supposedly involves. Posting every day, building on multiple platforms, showing up constantly on stories, launching live, being available in the DMs, networking, collaborating, optimizing, scaling. And then she looks at her actual day, the school runs or the home education, the snacks, the laundry, the emotional regulation of small humans, and she realizes that there just simply isn't space for all of that. So she thinks, there's no way. And honestly, if that's the model that she's trying to follow, she's right. Most business advice assumes long, uninterrupted stretches of time, and it assumes that you can just sit at a desk for 6 or more hours and simply work. And it assumes that when you say that you're going to be working, no one asks for a snack halfway through a sentence. Now that's just not the reality for most mums at home. And when you try to force that kind of model into a life that doesn't have room for it, everything starts to feel chaotic. You feel behind and scattered, and you might start something only to stop because it just all feels too much. Eventually, you quietly tell yourself that maybe this just isn't your season. But the issue isn't necessarily that you don't have enough time. The issue is that most of the options you're seeing just don't fit your reality. And instead of questioning the model, we question ourselves. We assume that we're undisciplined or distracted or somehow not serious enough, when in reality, we're trying to run a full-time entrepreneur's playbook inside a part-time family-first life. And of course, that feels exhausting. So before we even talk about how many hours you have, we need to let go of the idea that more hustle is the solution. Because for a mum building from home, hustle usually leads to burnout and resentment. And that is not what we're building here. So instead of trying to squeeze a full-time model into my life, I have chosen to structure my week differently. So right now I allocate about 10 hours a week to my business, which works out at about 2 hours a day across 5 days approximately. In the mornings, I focus on home education and time with my son, and that really anchors the day for me. That part doesn't compete with business because it comes first. Then in the afternoons, I have about a 2-hour block set aside for focused work. Now sometimes my mum helps me with home education during that time, and sometimes I'm working on the sofa while my son plays or does his own thing nearby. So there are days when I'm effectively supervising something in the background while also outlining content or designing something, for example. It generally isn't silent, and it certainly isn't a perfect setup, but it works because it fits our real life rather than an ideal version of it. One thing that has helped me enormously is being very intentional about what goes into those 2-hour blocks. I don't sit down with a long list and hope that somehow I'm going to get through everything. Instead, at the start of the week, I decide what I'm going to do in each of those blocks. Usually it's one main task and occasionally 2 if one of them is smaller, and I try to be realistic about how long something will actually take. Now if I'm filming, that will probably take the entire block. If I'm writing emails, maybe I might pair that with something lighter. I also deliberately leave my final 2-hour block completely empty when I plan the week, or maybe I'll choose something that is non-essential. If I do it, then great, and if not, it's no biggie. That space basically becomes my catch-up block because things do overrun and that is normal. So if something takes longer earlier in the week, I can just carry it into that final block, and instead of feeling like I've failed, I've been able to accomplish everything. And finishing what you plan to do really matters more than we sometimes realize. There's something that's in your brain, that little hit that you get when you tick something off the list. That builds momentum, because when you feel progress, you are far more likely to keep going. And motivation often grows out of completion rather than inspiration. Now, on the weeks when I do finish everything early, which certainly isn't every week, I find myself slightly ahead. And as a mum, that feeling of being ahead, even by a little, feels really nice. Now, there are also seasons when I will work a little more consistently in the evenings, particularly if I'm in a setup phase and I know that just pushing through now will create more breathing room later. Now, that's a conscious decision for a short time though. I don't rely on evenings as guaranteed time. If I'm tired, I stop. If I want to rest or do something creative or just simply be present with my family, I can choose to do that without guilt. Now, for some of you, early mornings might be the better rhythm. An hour before everyone wakes up can be quiet and focused in a way that afternoons aren't. And I genuinely admire women who thrive in that space. I am not naturally wired that way. If I tried to show up at 5 or 6 in the morning, I would technically be there, but I'm not entirely convinced my brain would be. So I build my business around the time of day when I know I can think clearly and I can show up well. And that's really the point. This isn't about copying my schedule. It's about designing a rhythm that fits your actual life and then sticking with it long enough to see progress. Because even a small amount of focused work done consistently over time adds up more than we often expect. So, what can 5 or 10 focused hours a week realistically build? Let me give you an example. Not necessarily the order I would recommend you follow, but simply just to illustrate what is possible in a single month when you use your time deliberately. So imagine you decide to focus on content for part of that month in order to build your authority and enable potential customers to find you. Rather than scrambling each week to produce something, you batch it. So in one block, you outline 2 to 4 pieces of content. In another, you refine them. And in one afternoon, you film all the videos or you record the podcasts or whatever it is you're going to be doing. Then you use a couple of additional blocks to edit and prepare the supporting emails or posts. Now that process might take a week, and at the beginning it might even stretch to 2 weeks. Because when you are new, everything takes longer. You're learning new tools, you're working out your voice and figuring out what really matters, and that's normal. But as you repeat the process, and especially if you use systems, it becomes more efficient. Tasks that once took 2 hours start taking 1, and what felt complicated begins to feel familiar. And once that content batch is finished, you've created breathing room instead of starting from 0 every single week. Now imagine in the remaining blocks of that month, you turn your attention to building something. You clarify one simple offer and the specific problem it solves. You create the core material, whether that's a PDF or a recorded training. Maybe you set up a basic page using a template rather than building from scratch. And maybe you connect your emails and test that everything is working. You're not building an empire in 30 days, but you are creating something real and live. Now, if someone had 40 or 60 uninterrupted hours every week, they might compress all of that into a short burst of intense work. Most mums don't have that luxury. So instead of trying to match that pace, you spread the same essential material or the work across the month in smaller, focused blocks. And that doesn't mean it takes a year to get started. It just means you move steadily enough to actually finish, which is what matters. You can absolutely have something live in your first month, even if it's simple, and then continue building and refining from there. The goal isn't to sprint like the hare and then collapse halfway through. It's to move like the tortoise, steady enough to keep going without burning out. Slow doesn't mean failing, it means sustainable. And sustainable is what produces results over time. Now, I also want to talk about something that doesn't always get said out loud, and that's the guilt that can come with this. Because even if you technically have an hour or 2 in the day, you might still feel uncomfortable for using it for business. You might find yourself wondering whether you should be doing something else instead, or whether it's selfish to want to build something of your own, especially when your time already feels really stretched. And if part of your motivation is income, so for example, if you genuinely need to contribute financially, but you don't want to put your child in daycare or into school, then that tension can feel even heavier. But building something from home isn't choosing business over your child. It's choosing to build something in a way that fits around them. There is a big difference between those two things. And also there's something quietly powerful about your child seeing you pursue something meaningful, seeing you learn new skills, work through problems, and finish what you start. You're not just earning money, you are modeling what it looks like to build something with intention. You are showing them that becoming a mother didn't mean the end of your growth or your contribution to society. Now, at the same time, there is a balance here, because rest is necessary. Burnout doesn't serve anyone, and there will absolutely be days when not working is actually the wisest thing that you can do. But there's also a subtle line between genuine rest and avoidance. Sometimes, "I'm too tired today" is completely valid, and sometimes it quietly becomes a reason not to begin at all. Only you can discern which one it is in a given moment. What I would say though is that even on a busy week, even on a week that feels messy, one focused hour is still possible more often than we think, and one focused hour still counts. You don't have to move quickly, you don't have to do everything at once, but you do need to keep moving, even if that movement feels small. Because consistent progress, however steady, however imperfect, builds confidence over time, and confidence changes how you show up. This isn't about adding pressure to your life, it's about stewarding the desire you already have. If you feel called to build something, don't just dismiss it because your circumstances aren't ideal. Build it slowly and build it within your limits, and build in a way that still protects the peace of your home. That is the balance that we're aiming for. The reason 10 hours a week can actually work is because the structure itself is simple. If you try to spread 10 hours across 5 platforms, 3 offers, constant launches, daily reactive tasks, it will always feel insufficient. But if those 10 hours are focused around one main evergreen platform, something that continues working for you rather than demanding that you chase the algorithm every week, that changes everything. You're not constantly starting again. You're building an asset. And the same is true for your offer. Not 10 small things, not scattered ideas. One clear primary offer that solves a specific problem with the option of other connected offers that can grow from it over time, but not right at the beginning. Now, I want to be clear about something before we finish. This isn't about personality type. It isn't about being naturally organized or confident or particularly entrepreneurial. It's about desire and willingness. If you have the desire to build something and you're willing to learn and implement steadily, even imperfectly, then this is absolutely within reach for you. You might not have the ideal amount of time, and you might not have long, uninterrupted days. You might feel like you're constantly working around the edges of your life rather than at the center of it. But that doesn't mean progress isn't possible. If you can consistently give 20 to 40 hours a month to something, which is what 5 to 10 hours a week adds up to, that is not insignificant. That is enough to build momentum, get something live, begin refining and improving until you start seeing results. And is it going to happen overnight? Probably not. Will it happen at the same speed as someone with unlimited time and no interruptions? Also probably not. But it can happen. What won't produce results is waiting until you have the perfect season or the perfect energy or the perfect setup. If you do nothing, nothing changes. If you give even a small, consistent amount of focused effort each week, things begin to shift. And that's how most businesses are built anyway, not in dramatic bursts, but in steady layers. So if you've been telling yourself that you simply don't have enough time, I would gently encourage you to reconsider that. You may not have ideal time, but you likely have enough time to begin. And beginning, done consistently, is what changes everything. Now, if timing is the thing that feels hardest for you right now, I have created a free PDF that walks you through how to maximize your time, not just in business, but across your life as a whole. Because this isn't really about squeezing more into your week, it's about being intentional with the hours that you already have. Now, inside that guide, I break down simple ways to structure your time so that it actually supports your priorities rather than constantly competing with them. You can go ahead and down that below. And if you're at the point where you're not just thinking about time, but about building a business properly with the right structure from the beginning, then I would also encourage you to look at my plan to profit system. That's where I walk you step by step through how to choose your primary offer, build it simply, set up the core systems, and create a business model that works even if you only have limited hours each week. Because 10 hours is enough. If it's applied to the right things in the right order and supported by the right structure. Everything will be linked below so you can choose the next step that feels right for you. And before you go, I would genuinely love to know, how many focused hours do you realistically have each week? Not the ideal version, the real one. Start there because that's where momentum begins.